Outpost Epsilon 7 was, by galactic standards, a profoundly boring place. It hung in the silent, inky blackness above a swirling marble of ochre and poison green, a planet designated Quarantine 734. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, a testament to the Galactic Concordance's ability to make profoundly different species work together, so long as the goal was mutually beneficial and involved a lot of paperwork. It was a spindle of gleaming chrome from the Glim hegemony, braced with the brutalist, obsidian-like composites of the Xylosian Empire. Inside, the corridors hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 different life support systems, all trying not to actively murder one another's occupants. For a Glim, the air was a carefully calibrated mix of noble gases. For a Xylosian, it was a humid, nitrogen-heavy soup thick enough to chew. And for the station's newest arrival, it was just a little on the dry side. Lord Commander Kthar of the Xylosian Empire did not approve of the new arrival. He stood, all 2.5 meters of chitinous, six-limbed glory, observing the human through the reinforced plasteel of the observation deck. The Xylosians were a species forged in the crucible of a high-gravity world where everything was either predator or prey, and the distinction was often a matter of who struck first. They were natural warriors, their bodies covered in a thick exoskeleton, their primary limbs ending in razor-sharp claws, and their mandibles capable of shearing through steel plating. Kthar saw strength as the only true virtue. Honor was its vessel, and victory its proof. The human, by contrast, was an offense to every one of his warrior sensibilities. It was a bipedal sack of soft, pinkish flesh, utterly devoid of natural armor. It had no claws, no fangs to speak of, no obvious method of defending itself beyond flailing its ludicrously fragile limbs. It was small, squishy, and, Kthar noted with a chitter of disgust, currently smiling. Smiling was a threat display for over a dozen species on this station. For humans, apparently, it was a sign of what? Contentment? Idiocy? The concepts were largely interchangeable in the Xylosian worldview. Behold the apex of primate evolution. A series of harmonic chimes resonated through the observation deck. The sound emanated from Chief Xenobiologist Zorp, a being of pure, crystalline silicon that hovered a few centimeters off the floor. Zorp was a Glim, a species that had long ago abandoned messy organic forms for what they considered the perfection of sentient crystal. They saw the universe as a grand equation, and life as a series of biological data points. Its homeostatic processes are a chaotic cascade of inefficiency, Zorp chimed, its crystalline facets shimmering with condescending light. The cardiovascular system is a plumbing nightmare, prone to blockages and catastrophic failure. The skeletal structure is brittle, and its neurochemistry, by the great prism, it's a cosmic garage sale of anxiety, irrational fear, and baseless aggression. It is a miracle they ever achieved powered flight without their entire species succumbing to a collective panic attack. Kthar scraped a claw against the floor, a sound like a shovel on concrete. They are designated a level 2 sapient species, yet they possess no martial prowess. Their diplomatic successes are a matter of sheer, baffling persistence. They simply annoy their opponents into submission. It is not an honorable tactic. This was the prevailing galactic opinion on humanity. They were the new kids on the block, a bafflingly successful species that had stumbled out of their high-gravity death world, as the xenobiologists called it, and somehow managed to not get immediately eaten or conquered. They were seen as weak, fragile, and emotionally volatile. Their technology was haphazardly reverse-engineered, their culture was a mess of contradictions, and their biology was a joke. They were the galaxy's weird, squishy cousins that you had to invite to the party but hoped wouldn't touch anything expensive. The human in question was named Jake. He was the station's new cross-species medic, a role that required a deep understanding of dozens of alien physiologies. The Concordance had assigned a human to the post because, in a rare moment of backhanded compliment, the official report stated that human medical practitioners display a bizarre talent for improvisation when faced with incomplete data, which was a polite way of saying they were good at guessing. Jake finished unpacking his small duffel bag in his assigned quarters. The room was sterile, functional, and designed for a being of average galactic height, which meant the ceiling was a bit high for him. He pinned a faded photograph of a golden retriever to the wall, a creature so horrifyingly predatory by Glim standards that Zorp would have classified it as a weapon. Then he headed for the station's primary laboratory, where he was scheduled to be briefed on their primary subject of study, the entity in Quarantine Bay 4. He walked with an easy, rolling gait that the Xylosians interpreted as a lack of discipline and the Glim saw as biomechanically inefficient. He nodded and smiled at the various aliens he passed, his expression of placid friendliness deeply unsettling to most of them. On the side of his neck, just below his ear, was a simple tattoo in black ink. It was in the human script called English, and it spelled out the word medic. Kthar and Zorp met him at the lab's entrance. Kthar loomed over him, a mountain of sharpened angles and predatory intent. Zorp hovered at eye level, its crystalline form pulsing with a faint, analytical light. Human, Kthar's voice was a series of guttural clicks and deep rumbles, translated by the device on his chest. You are to be briefed on the asset. Do not touch anything. Your species is known for its tactile curiosity, a curiosity often resulting in self-injury or minor explosions, Zorp added, its chimes sounding like a disapproving wind chime. Your file indicates you are a medic, a title your species applies to everyone from battlefield surgeons to individuals who apply adhesive strips to minor abrasions. Clarify your qualifications. Jake gave them that same infuriatingly calm smile. You can call me Jake, and I'm more of the battlefield surgeon variety. Less of the adhesive strip kind, though I do appreciate a well-made bandage. Got a degree in xenophysiology from Armstrong University on Luna. Did a residency at the Tri-Sector General Hospital. Spent a few years with the Colonial Marine Corps as a field surgeon. The mention of the Colonial Marines meant nothing to them. It was just another nonsensical human designation. Kthar grunted, unimpressed. The human's history was irrelevant. His physical form told the only story that mattered. Your role here is simple, human Jake, Zorp chimed. You will monitor the biotelemetry of the asset. You will observe. You will collate data. You will do nothing else. The asset is a unique organism, a psychic predator. We have named it the Neurogorgon. Its biology is beyond your primitive understanding, psychic predator. Jake's eyebrows went up. So it gets in your head? Fun. He said the word fun with the same casual tone one might use to describe a pleasant afternoon. Kthar leaned in close, his complex insectoid eyes focusing on Jake. It does not get in your head, human. It projects a bioresonant field that interfaces directly with the fear centers of the brain. It manifests your deepest terrors. It paralyzes its prey with pure, undiluted horror before feeding. A Xylosian warrior, trained from hatching to master his fear, can withstand its influence for precisely 17 of your seconds before his motor functions cease. For a creature like you, a being literally swimming in a soup of irrational anxieties, exposure would be instantaneous, basically a panic attack with teeth. Jake summarized, nodding thoughtfully. Got it. So don't get exposed. Kthar and Zorp exchanged a look. It was a look that crossed species boundaries, a universal expression of exasperated superiority. This human was even more simplistic than they had anticipated. This posting was going to be very, very long. The briefing continued, but Jake's attention seemed to drift. He looked at the containment schematics, his eyes lingering on the power conduits and the emergency atmospheric controls. He asked about the station's fire suppression system, a question Zorp dismissed as irrelevant. The human's mind was clearly unfocused, flitting from one trivial detail to another. They were wasting their time. And then, the universe decided to stop being boring. It started with a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the deck plates. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling. A deep, gut-wrenching wrongness that made the fine filaments on a Xylosian's antennae twitch and the crystalline lattice of a Glim shimmer with dissonance. A single, piercing alarm klaxon cut through the station's quiet hum. Red lights began to flash, painting the sterile corridors in the color of fresh blood. Containment breach, a computerized voice announced, devoid of the panic that was suddenly gripping every organic being on the station. Asset has breached primary and secondary containment fields in Quarantine Bay 4. All personnel to lockdown stations. This is not a drill. Panic was a generous word for what happened next. It was more like a complete nervous system meltdown on a station-wide scale. The Neurogorgon wasn't just loose. Its psychic influence was now washing through the station's corridors like a tsunami of pure terror. A Xylosian security officer, a decorated veteran of 3 stellar campaigns, suddenly dropped his plasma rifle and began screaming about chitin-devouring parasites. 2 Glim technicians shattered, their crystalline forms exploding into a cloud of silicon dust as their consciousness overloaded. The station, a model of interspecies cooperation, became a cacophony of shrieking, gibbering, and shattering. In the main lab, Kthar felt the first wave hit him. It was a cold dread that bypassed his centuries of warrior conditioning. He saw a vision of his home world, his glorious hive city, not burning, but silent, empty, a graveyard of his entire species, and he was the last one left. His massive frame locked up, his mandibles clicking uselessly. He was a statue of obsidian and honor, paralyzed by a grief that wasn't his own. Zorp fared no better. For a Glim, the ultimate fear was entropy, the dissolution of order into meaningless chaos. The psychic wave translated this existential dread into pure sensory data. Zorp perceived the heat death of the universe, the final, silent decay of all information, all light, all thought. Its harmonic frequency became a discordant shriek, its crystalline body vibrating so violently it threatened to disintegrate. It was experiencing the end of everything, all at once. And Jake walked over to the lab's small nutrient synthesizer, tapped a few buttons, and began to brew a cup of coffee. The aroma of dark roast Colombian beans filled the air, a scent so utterly mundane, so profoundly out of place, that it was a violation of the current reality. Kthar, through his haze of psychic torment, managed to focus one of his multifaceted eyes on the human. The small, soft creature was calmly adding 2 packets of sugar to a steaming mug. He was humming. "What are you doing?" Kthar forced the words out, his translator turning the clicks and rumbles into a strained, horrified whisper. Jake took a sip of his coffee. "It's decaf. Don't want to get the jitters." He looked around at the chaos, the flashing red lights, the petrified warrior, and the vibrating crystal. Bit of a mess, huh? Reminds me of Black Friday shopping back on Earth. You get used to the ambient sense of doom. Zorp, struggling to maintain its physical integrity, focused its sensorium on the human. "Your neurochemistry, it should be overloaded." It chimed, the notes fractured and dissonant. "My sensors indicate the psychic field is passing through your biological form. You are not immune. Why are you not incapacitated?" "Oh, I feel it," Jake said cheerfully, leaning against a console. "Feels like I've forgotten to pay my taxes, and I'm about to get audited by a swarm of giant, angry wasps. It's not pleasant, but you know, on a scale of 1 to realizing you've used salt instead of sugar in your grandmother's birthday cake, it's maybe a 6. A solid 7, tops." This statement was so nonsensical, so completely alien to their understanding of fear and survival, that it momentarily broke through the Neurogorgon's psychic assault. Kthar and Zorp stared, their respective forms of consciousness grappling with a paradox far more terrifying than the monster loose on the station. The human was not ignoring the fear. He was rating it. Jake finished his coffee and set the mug down with a decisive click. "Right. Well, sitting around here isn't going to reseal the containment doors." He began to move. But he didn't move towards the weapons locker, which was Kthar's only remaining logical thought. He didn't move towards the emergency escape pod, which Zorp's logic centers were screaming was the only viable option. Instead, he walked over to a medical supply cabinet and pulled out a standard-issue diagnostic scanner, a device used for reading alien biometrics. Then he went to an emergency locker and retrieved a high-intensity signal flare. Finally, he grabbed a portable fire extinguisher from the wall. "Scanner, flare, fire extinguisher," Zorp managed to chime, its internal processors trying to find a pattern. "The components do not compute. There is no tactical application for this combination of items, not for you." "Maybe," Jake said, hefting the fire extinguisher. "For me, this is just a Tuesday." He gave them a wink. "Stay put. Try not to shatter or have an existential crisis. I'll be right back." And with that, the small, soft, utterly baffling creature walked out of the lab and into the red-lit, terror-filled corridor, heading directly towards the source of the psychic disturbance. Kthar and Zorp were left alone with the hum of the emergency lights and the lingering, impossible smell of coffee. The fear from the Neurogorgon was still pressing in on them, but it was now competing with a new, far more potent emotion, profound and absolute confusion. The human's behavior did not fit any known model for prey species. In fact, it didn't fit any model at all. The corridors of Epsilon 7 were a charnel house of consciousness. Alien crew members were strewn about, some catatonic, others thrashing against invisible horrors. The Neurogorgon was a thing of biological nightmare, a fusion of glistening flesh, chitinous plates, and a multitude of eyes that glowed with a sickly internal light. It was physically imposing, but its true weapon was the silent, invisible wave of terror it exuded. It moved through the station not like a predator hunting, but like a god reaping a harvest of sanity. It found its way to the command center, the station's nerve center. The blast doors were sealed, but the creature's psychic power simply turned the minds of the operators inside to jelly, causing one of them to override the lockdown in a fit of gibbering madness. The doors hissed open, and the creature slithered inside. It was here that Jake, having taken a route through the maintenance crawl spaces, was waiting. He wasn't hiding. He was standing in the middle of the room, right next to the captain's chair, holding the fire extinguisher like it was a plasma rifle. The Neurogorgon paused. It had never encountered a prey item that awaited it. It focused its psychic might, a concentrated beam of pure, distilled terror, directly at the small, fleshy being. Back in the lab, Kthar and Zorp felt the psychic backlash through the station's internal sensors. The spike was immense, an order of magnitude stronger than anything they had experienced. It was a psychic killing blow. He is gone, Kthar rumbled, a strange sense of, not grief, but a warrior's respect for the fallen, even for a creature so pathetically outmatched. A statistical certainty, Zorp chimed, its form slowly stabilizing now that the primary psychic assault had a new focus. His primitive neurology could not have possibly withstood that level of. Zorp's analytical chime cut off abruptly. On the main view screen, which was still linked to the command center's security feed, the image was clear. The Neurogorgon was blasting the human with enough psychic energy to liquefy the mind of a dreadnought leviathan. And the human was not screaming. He was not catatonic. He was just standing there, a slight frown on his face, as if he were trying to solve a particularly tricky crossword puzzle. The wave of terror washed over Jake, and it was everything Kthar had described and more. He saw visions of failure, of letting his comrades die on forgotten battlefields. He felt the cold touch of personal loss, the gnawing dread of cosmic loneliness, the sharp, acidic sting of every mistake he had ever made. It was a symphony of agony, expertly crafted to shatter the psyche. And Jake let it wash over him. He experienced it. He acknowledged it. And then he filed it away under unpleasant but manageable. He had felt worse. The quiet disappointment in his father's eyes after he dropped out of art school was arguably more crippling. The sheer, soul-crushing terror of assembling a piece of IKEA furniture with one screw missing was a level of horror this creature couldn't even begin to comprehend. This psychic attack was loud. It was powerful, but it was crude. It was a sledgehammer to the mind. Humanity had evolved on a planet that had perfected the art of the psychological scalpel. It had evolved anxiety, stress, regret, and existential dread. Humans didn't need an external monster to project fear. They were self-generating terror factories, walking around with a Neurogorgon in their own skulls every single day. "Is that all you've got?" Jake said, his voice calm and clear in the silent command center. The Neurogorgon, for the first time in its existence, felt a flicker of something that was not predatory hunger. It was confusion. Its ultimate weapon had failed. It redoubled its efforts, and Jake just sighed, as if bored. "Okay, my turn," he said. He raised the medical scanner and activated it. It wasn't a weapon. It was a diagnostic tool. But he had recalibrated its frequency, telling it to ignore tissue, bone, and blood, and instead to search for high concentrations of bioelectrical and psychic energy. On the scanner's small screen, a glowing orb of light appeared in the center of the Neurogorgon's mass. The psychic organ, the brain, and the weapon, all in one. Then he raised the signal flare. He didn't fire it at the creature. He pointed it straight up at the ceiling and triggered it. The command center was instantly filled with a blinding, searing magnesium-white light and a deafening, high-pitched screech. It was a sensory overload grenade. For a creature whose entire existence was based on the subtle art of psychic manipulation, It was like a symphony conductor being hit with a full-blast rock concert. The Neurogorgon shrieked, a real, physical sound this time, and recoiled. Its psychic field sputtered and died. Its many eyes squeezed shut against the blinding light. It was disoriented, confused, vulnerable. And in that moment of vulnerability, Jake moved. He didn't charge like a warrior. He moved with the quiet, efficient economy of motion of a surgeon. He closed the distance in 3 long strides. He raised the fire extinguisher, aimed the nozzle at a specific spot at the base of the creature's bulbous head, a spot he'd pinpointed with the scanner as a major nerve ganglion, and squeezed the handle. A cloud of supercooled carbon dioxide blasted out, covering the nerve cluster in a layer of white frost. The effect was instantaneous. The Neurogorgon's shriek cut off. Its thrashing limbs went rigid. Its glowing eyes dimmed. It didn't die. It just switched off. The intense cold had caused a temporary paralysis of its central nervous system. It crashed to the floor, completely immobilized. A twitching, 10-ton paperweight. Jake gave the frozen nerve cluster a little pat. "Nap time," he said. He then walked over to the command console, keyed in the override code for the containment fields, a code he had memorized from the schematics earlier, and reactivated them. Security drones, no longer hampered by psychic interference, whirred into the room and began securing the paralyzed creature with energy binders. The red alert lights switched off. The klaxon fell silent. The station returned to its normal, quiet hum. Back in the lab, Thar and Zorp watched the whole thing on the view screen in absolute, stunned silence. The feed showed the human, Jake, casually dusting off his hands before walking over to the captain's personal nutrient synthesizer. A moment later, he was sipping from a fresh mug. It took them 10 minutes to restore their motor and cognitive functions enough to make their way to the command center. They found Jake sitting in the captain's chair, his feet up on the console, looking for all the world like he owned the place. The Neurogorgon was already being levitated out of the room by the drones. Thar stood before him, his warrior's pride a shattered ruin. He had been paralyzed by the creature's aura. This soft, weak thing had faced it down and neutralized it with a flare and a fire extinguisher. How? It was the only word his translator could produce. Zorp hovered beside him, its crystalline form dim, as if in shame. The data is incongruous. Your biological structure is fragile. Your neurochemistry is primitive. You should have been the first to fall. Yet you were not. You were effective. The methodology was unorthodox, but brutally logical. Explain. The data requires context. Jake took a long, slow sip of his drink. He looked at the towering insectoid warrior and the floating sentient crystal, and he saw not arrogance or condescension, but a deep, genuine, and almost childlike confusion. He decided they deserved an explanation. "You guys have it all backward," he began, his voice calm and even. "You look at humanity and you see weakness. You see our soft skin, our lack of claws, our messy emotions, and you write us off as a biological fluke. A cosmic joke. You're wrong. Everything you think is a weakness is our greatest strength." He swung his feet off the console and leaned forward. "Let's start with my home world, Earth. You guys have it classified as a Class 12 Death World. That's a cute designation. We just call it home. Your worlds, Thar, are harsh. They forge warriors. Your worlds, Zorp, are stable. They forge intellects. My world is actively, creatively, and enthusiastically trying to kill everything on it, all the time. Our gravity is so strong it would crush a Glim's crystalline structure over time. Our atmosphere is a corrosive soup of oxygen that is violently poisonous to about 90% of known galactic species. We live on a planet that is in a constant state of geological rage. It shakes itself apart, vomits lava, and tries to drown us with oceans on a regular basis. He held up his soft, fleshy hands. You see these? You see weakness. I see the hands of a creature that had to learn to create tools to survive, because it wasn't born with them. We don't have claws, so we forged swords from iron we ripped out of the ground. We don't have armor, so we learned to build it, from animal hides to nanoweave combat suits. We are soft, and that makes us adaptable. You, Thar, your exoskeleton is strong, but it's rigid. It can be broken. We bend. We yield. We don't break so easily. He turned his gaze to Zorp. And our minds. You call our neurochemistry chaotic. You're right. It is. It's a mess. Because we evolved on a world where the threats weren't just physical. They were psychological. Your Neurogorgons fear attack? That was impressive. A real sledgehammer. But on Earth, we have things that are far more insidious. Ever heard of a cordyceps fungus? It's a mushroom. It doesn't just kill you. It infects an insect, hijacks its brain, forces it to climb to a high place, and then erupts out of its head to spread its spores. We have parasites that live inside other creatures, controlling them, manipulating them. We have animals that use camouflage so perfect they are functionally invisible. We have plants that are indistinguishable from the rocks they grow on, until you step on them and they inject you with a neurotoxin that will kill you in 30 seconds. Our world is a planet of liars, cheats, and mimics. We had to evolve a chaotic brain just to process the sheer, relentless paranoia of it all. Jake stood up and began to pace. That psychic blast. It showed me my worst fears. Big deal. I live with my worst fears every day. They're called a mortgage, my cholesterol levels, and the ever-present, soul-crushing dread that I might have left the stove on. We are a species that has weaponized anxiety. We run on it. It fuels our innovation, our ambition, our art. Your Neurogorgon tried to drown me in a glass of water, but it didn't realize I was born in the middle of the ocean. He paused and pointed to the tattoo on his neck. This says medic. You think that means I'm a healer. And I am. But in the colonial Marines, the medics are a different breed. Our job isn't just to patch people up. Our job is to be the calmest person in the middle of a screaming vortex of chaos. When armored soldiers with plasma cannons are panicking, the medic has to be the one who is thinking clearly. We run towards the explosions. We run towards the screaming. Because our job is to bring order to the chaos. Your monster was just another form of chaos. A loud, ugly, telepathic one, but chaos nonetheless. And I am very, very good at my job. He looked at them, his expression no longer friendly and placid, but hard as ancient stone. You see, being consistently, universally, and profoundly underestimated by every other species in the galaxy is the greatest strategic advantage a species could ever hope for. You were so busy looking at my soft skin that you never bothered to check what was underneath. He gently pulled at the collar of his uniform, revealing the skin beneath the tattoo. It was a latticework of old scars. Silvery lines from blades, puckered circles from plasma burns, jagged patterns from shrapnel. A roadmap of a life lived in the heart of the furnace. Kthar and Zorp were utterly silent. The command center, once a symbol of their superiority, now felt like a classroom where they had just been brutally schooled. Every assumption they had ever made about humanity, every condescending joke, every arrogant dismissal, had been incinerated. They were not looking at a fragile prey animal. They were looking at the product of a world so savage it bred monsters. And this human was the one who ran towards them with a roll of bandages and a calm smile. The medic tattoo was not a job description. It was a warning label. It meant that this being was a professional at dealing with the absolute worst the universe had to offer. Kthar, the great Lord Commander, felt a tremor run through his warrior's frame. It was not the psychic fear of the Neurogorgon. It was a far older, far more primal emotion. It was the instinctive terror of a predator that has just realized it is, in fact, prey. He finally understood. Humans weren't weak because they were soft. They were soft so they could endure pressures that would shatter a creature made of living rock or chitinous steel. Zorp's crystalline mind, a being of pure logic, was reeling from the implications. Humanity was not a chaotic anomaly. They were the ultimate expression of survival through adaptation. Their technology wasn't haphazard. It was brutally pragmatic. Their psychology wasn't a flaw. It was a hardened shield. The data was not incongruous. The Glim had simply been using the wrong equation all along. The colonial Marines, Kthar's translator rasped, the voice filled with a new, terrifying respect. What are they? Jake's easy smile returned, but now it looked different to them. It no longer looked placid or idiotic. It looked predatory. Oh, them? He said, picking up his mug. They're the people my government sends when a delicate diplomatic situation needs to be resolved with overwhelming, concentrated violence. Think of them as the galaxy's most heavily armed problem-solving committee. Their solution to most problems is to make it someone else's problem. Permanently. He took a final sip of his drink and set the mug down. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to see if the commissary has any of those little powdered donuts. Subduing psychic horrors always makes me hungry for something sweet. He walked out of the command center, leaving the two most powerful beings on the station standing in a silence so profound it felt like the vacuum of space itself. They just stared at the empty doorway, their entire understanding of the galactic power structure completely and irrevocably shattered. The galaxy was not the orderly, predictable place they thought it was. They had just discovered that the squishy, emotional, anxiety-ridden clowns of the cosmos were, in fact, the boogeymen. And they had just put one in charge of their infirmary.